what we should be teaching about stress in high school today. It was an afternoon in the fall of 1970. I was a second-year medical student at the University of Maryland Medical School in Baltimore, Maryland, the city where I was born and raised. It was a typical routine day for most second-year medical students, except for me, that is. Because instead of being in class, I was sitting in the waiting room of the outpatient department of the psychiatric hospital, about to become a psychotherapy patient for the first time in my life. Fortunately, the University of Maryland Medical School offered free psychotherapy sessions for any medical student who needed them, and I had decided that that was me. So as I sat there that afternoon, waiting to meet some unknown therapist who had been assigned to me, I couldn't help thinking, how had it finally come down to this? Why was it that I was feeling so stressed that I could no longer cope with things on my own? Why was it that despite all the education that I had received and all the successes I had had in my life up to that point, I couldn't stop feeling anxious all the time? Why was it that I couldn't stop getting angry or irritated or frustrated at the drop of a dime? Or why was I continuing to have problems in my relationships with my family members, friends, and other people? It just didn't make any sense. After all, I had had a very normal and happy childhood. I was blessed with two very loving and caring parents. I graduated from my high school with one of the highest GPAs in my class of more than 900 seniors. I then attended Duke University, where I also did very well academically, and I had even done very well in my first year of medical school. I didn't have an answer then, but I do now, and it's a simple one. And the answer is that the education system that I went through back in 1960s and 1970s, and that my parents and I had been counting on to prepare me for life, had actually let me down. It may have prepared me well academically, but it did very little to help me understand myself as a human being. In fact, when I look back on it now, the education system that I went through back then really taught me more about how to have stress in my life than it did teach me how to graduate and live stress-free. And that's why I'm here today, because the education system that we have today, the one that you're in and other high school students are in right now, are still letting you and your parents down. We're still not teaching our high school students, or even our college students for that matter, how to graduate and live stress-free. And that's a shame, because it's not that hard to do. As for me, I graduated medical school just fine. I went on to practice internal medicine in the Baltimore area very successfully for 23 years. And I finally figured out how to stop being anxious all the time, how to stop being an angry, irritable person, and how to have much better relationships with just about everybody around me. And I've been teaching other people how to do those things for the last 30 years. I now run my own Stress Mastery Academy. I've published more than 10 books on how to eliminate stress. And as it was mentioned, I've been the official sponsor of National Stress Awareness Month every April in the United States for the last 24 years. But I didn't learn those stress mastery skills from any of my formal education programs. I actually had to go out and seek them out or discover them on my own. So what would I do if I was suddenly put in charge of high school education of stress education for all high school students in America today, or even around the world for that matter? What would I teach? Well, I would start with three key foundational principles. These are the three most important things that I learned about stress in my life, and that I think everyone should know and understand by the time they graduate high school. And the fascinating thing about each of these principles is they're very, very different from what most people are being taught to believe about stress today. The first thing I would want to make sure that every high school student knew and understood about stress before they graduated is that stress is just a word. That's really all it is. That's all it's ever been. It's just a general term, a buzzword, an abstract concept that we use to talk about other things in life that we really do experience and we really do suffer from. Whenever we think we're suffering from stress, we're not. We're suffering from something else. So what is that something else that we're suffering from when we think we're having stress or we feel like we're having stress? Well, very simply, it's we're having problems in our life. We're having very specific problems. We could be having one big problem or a couple big problems, or we could be having lots of little problems that are ganging up on us. But whenever we think or feel that we're having stress, we're not. We're having problems in our life. And that's what this key principle means. And you know, we make the very same mistake today when we define the word stress purely in biologic or physiologic terms. It's very similar to if I showed you this picture and I said, is this a horse? And you would all immediately know, no, that's not a horse. That's not the whole story. That's just part of a horse. Actually, it's the tail end of a horse. If you really want to know what a horse is, you have to expand your perspective. You have to take in the whole animal to know what a horse is. Well, we make the very same mistake when we think that stress is just what goes on in our bodies. Yes, these are real problems. They do happen for people. I know this very well as a physician, treating people for these kinds of problems. But that's not the whole story. In fact, that's the tail end of the story. Where do we think all these problems in our body come from? They come from having other problems in life that we don't know how to deal with or we don't deal with very well, and they end up affecting our bodies. Well, the next principle is that if you're actually going to take on the stressful problems in your life and you're going to try and do something about them to solve them or to get rid of them, you basically are faced with two choices. You can either try and deal with the symptoms of your causes or you can of your problems, or you can try to deal with the causes. As human beings, we only get these two choices, assuming that is we don't ignore our problems or just pretend we don't have them or hope they'll just go away on their own. Unfortunately, what most people are being taught to do with their stressful problems today is this. We're all being taught to take all of our problems in life and conceptually put them in one big basket, then call that basket stress, and then ask ourselves, how can I deal with my stress? Now, that's a perfectly fine strategy if all you want to do is deal with the symptoms of your problems. I mean, we could put all our problems into this basket, call it stress, and then we could go, you know, I think I'm going to use alcohol to deal with my stress. Or I think I'm going to use cigarettes or illegal drugs or maybe prescription medications. Or maybe I'm going to use Haagen-Dazs and chocolate chip cookies. We can choose to do that if we want. But in fact, all we're really doing is dealing with the symptoms. And our problems are not really going away. They're going to keep coming back over and over again to bother us. And we're going to keep having to use these chemical coping solutions over and over again. And we all know that these solutions come with their own set of additional problems and risks as well, which just get added onto the heap of the other problems that we're already experiencing. So if you've been well educated and you know that, you may say to yourself, okay, well, I'm going to make a healthier choice. I'm going to use stress management techniques because that's what I'm being told to do. And so you could turn to things like biofeedback, relaxation exercises, Tai Chi, meditation, deep breathing exercises, even physical exercise. And you can use all of these things to deal with your stress. But really, it's not that different than using chemical coping solutions. It's just healthier. You have more positive benefits from those procedures. But they're still mostly, not 100%, but they're mostly dealing with just the symptoms of your problems. So the point of understanding principle number 2 is recognizing that if you really want to deal with your problems the best way, if you really want to make them go away rather than have to struggle to cope with them for the rest of your life, you're eventually going to have to figure out how to deal with their causes. And this brings me to the third and most important principle I think everyone should know and understand about stress before they graduate. And that is, when it comes to attacking the causes of our problems, we have to understand this third principle. What you see is not all there is. What this means is whenever we have problems in life or stressful problems in life, whatever they may be, you have to understand the causes are always going to come in two varieties. There's always going to be external causes and there's always going to be internal causes. Now, the external causes are ones that are very easy for us to see, very easy for other people to see. But that's only half the story. That's only half the puzzle pieces. What about all the internal causes that go on inside of us? What are these? Well, these are quite simply thought patterns, behavior patterns, ideas that we have, principles that we've adopted, rules that we've made up for ourselves or other people have given us, belief systems that we have. These things all go on inside of us, so we don't see them very easily. And certainly other people can't see them at all. But they're very real, they do exist, and when we're having stressful problems in life, they're always going to be involved, even if there are very clear external circumstances. And by the way, these internal causes are fairly well known. There are a lot of psychologists and other people who've recognized some of these internal causes. They're just not being taught that much in our educational system today. Let me give you one example of how easy this is to do, how easy it would be to teach some of these internal causes in our educational system. So remember I said there's hundreds and hundreds of specific problems we can have whenever we use this word stress. So let's just pick one of them today for demonstration purposes. Let's pick this one. I think we can all agree there's lots of anger and violence in the world today. So anger is a very common problem. And I'm sure each of you sitting here today could tell me exactly what external things are going on in your life that are making you angry. You could easily pinpoint those things and recognize them very easily. Okay? But how many of you sitting here today can tell me what the internal causes of anger are in a human being? How many of you know exactly how, for example, how a human being has to be thinking in order for the emotion of anger to occur inside their bodies? So what are the internal thought patterns that produce anger in human beings? Well, the first way we have to be thinking whenever we're angry is that somebody did something bad or wrong. Somebody did something they shouldn't have done. The second way we have to be thinking is that someone was hurt, harmed, humiliated, embarrassed, betrayed, disappointed, let down by whatever was done by that person. And then the third way we have to be thinking whenever we're angry is that the person who did number one and number two was 100% responsible, or what I call unilaterally to blame. What that usually means is they were at fault and we had nothing to do with it. And then if you believe that all three of these things are absolutely true, and if you see the world through that filter, then the normal expectation in our society today is that the person who committed those things should admit what they did wrong, offer to make amends, and or be punished. So this helps us understand a lot about the emotion of anger in human beings. And it also can help us deal with our own angry feelings whenever we have them. So let me give you two examples from my own life that illustrate this point. One of them has to do with people cutting me off in traffic, and the other has to do with something I call the French fry episode. In my younger, less enlightened years, I used to love to get angry when people cut me off in traffic. I mean, there you are sitting in your car, the safety and privacy of your car, and you can really work up that anger. You can really let it rip. And I used to think that was a good thing. So I used to like to do that. And then one day I was driving down the highway in the right lane of an expressway, and sure enough, somebody slowly comes in off the entrance ramp, pulls into my lane, causes me to hit my brakes and almost have a collision. And I started to go into my anger routine, and I was working it up, and then all of a sudden I realized something that I hadn't seen before. I realized that I was going about 80 miles an hour when that happened. And the minute I saw that, guess what? I couldn't feel angry anymore. I couldn't get angry at that person. Why? Because I could no longer see them as being 100% responsible or unilaterally to blame for what happened. I had actually contributed in a big way to that event taking place. Not only that, but I immediately recognized other times in my own life when I had been in that other person's position. I had been coming onto a highway from an entrance ramp. I quickly glanced down the road to see how much time I had to get in. I saw a car way in the distance. I had no idea how fast that car was going. So I leisurely pulled into the right-hand lane, and the same thing happened. And I knew in those moments for myself, I wasn't acting in a bad way. I wasn't being an irresponsible driver. I wasn't being an inconsiderate driver. I just had no idea how fast that person was going. Okay? But this is the reality that got triggered in my body the moment that thing happened. It wasn't really the truth about what happened. And the minute I did that, my anger completely disappeared. This brings me to the French fry story. Many years ago, when my daughter was about 3 or 4 years old, we had been out one evening, and I was driving home. We were about 30 minutes from our house. My daughter was sitting in the back seat of the car, safely strapped into her car seat right in the middle of the back seat. And all of a sudden, she starts whining and complaining, getting very agitated. And she starts saying, "Daddy, I'm very hungry. I need some food." And I tried to reason with her, and I tried, "Well, couldn't you wait? We're almost home. We got plenty of food." "No, Daddy, I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm too uncomfortable. I got to have something." So I said, "All right." So I pulled into the closest fast food restaurant, drive-through lane, ordered her a soda and a small order of fries, which is what she wanted. Got the bag from the attendant, handed it back to my daughter. She quieted down. All is well. Start driving towards home. A couple minutes go by, don't hear any noise, assuming she's happily sitting back there eating her food. And I happened to glance in the rearview mirror to see what she was doing. I expected to see her happily eating her food. That's not what I saw. I saw her sitting there taking the French fries out of the bag one by one and breaking them in half and putting them on the armrest of her car seat. And the minute I saw that, I just started to well up with anger. I mean, I felt like she had really played me. I felt that she had lied to me. She had pretended she was so hungry. And she really wasn't that hungry at all because she clearly wasn't eating her food. I was just getting ready to turn around and blast her and criticize her for her behavior. And I had the good fortune to inhibit that automatic response and ask her what she was doing. I didn't think she was going to have a good answer. But I decided before I blast her, I'm going to ask her. So I asked her what she was doing. And guess what she said? She said, "Daddy, the French fries are too hot for me." I went, "Oh, I am so happy that I did that I didn't just go with my automatic knee-jerk reflex. I am so happy that I asked her. Because what I discovered by doing that is she really wasn't doing something bad or wrong. And she really hadn't lied to me. She wasn't playing me. She wasn't taking advantage of me like I had thought she was. And the minute I saw that, all my anger disappeared. But the interesting thing about this story is, of course, we know that the third conversation or the third thought pattern, she was totally responsible for her behavior in the backseat of the car, right? I didn't have anything to do with that, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. And then a couple more minutes later, I'm driving down the road, and I go like, "Oh, my God, I just remembered something." About 2 weeks prior to this event, my wife and daughter and I were out at a restaurant, and my daughter ordered a child's plate that came with French fries. And the waitress brings the plates out, puts them down on the table, and I immediately see that there's steam rising off the French fries from my daughter's plate. I jumped out of my chair, went over to my daughter, and said, "Cautioned her not to touch the French fries." And then I started taking the French fries one by one, breaking them in half so they would cool off faster. So what originally got triggered in my body that day when I looked in the rearview mirror was that all of these things were true. But she really wasn't doing something bad and wrong. She really hadn't played me or lied to me or misrepresented what was going on. And she wasn't even 100% responsible for what happened because I had taught her that exact behavior just 2 weeks earlier. I forgot about it. This is how human emotions occur for us. They're based upon what gets triggered in our body, not what actually happens in the real world. And a lot of times you'll find out, if you understand this mechanism, if this were taught to you, and you know what it is whenever you're angry, you'll be able to find out that and much of the time, one or more of these beliefs are not going to be true. So in closing, let me say that we think these kinds of events that I just talked about are rare, but they're not. They happen to each of us every single day, multiple times every day. We are constantly getting triggered to have internal thoughts, internal beliefs, internal reactions, internal perceptions about what we think is true. And those things are what's driving our emotions. Those things are what are contributing to our problems, many of our problems in life. And it turns out a lot of times they aren't as true as we originally think they are. So when I've taught these kind of principles to adults, not just about anger, but about other negative emotions or other problems they may be experiencing in life, guess what they usually say? They usually say, "Wow, how come nobody told me this stuff earlier in my life? It might have saved me a lot of trouble, a lot of heartache, a lot of difficulties if I just knew this earlier." So the question I want to leave you with is, what would the world be like if everyone knew and understood deeply these three principles, and also knew something about the internal causes of their stressful emotions in life, and perhaps some other common stressful problems that occur by the time they graduated high school? Said another way, what would the world be like if we started teaching our high school students and our college students how to be happy, healthy, and relatively stress-free, instead of teaching them how to be angry, anxious, frustrated, and stressed most of the time? Thank you.